Israel never like negotiated on the terms that are now laid out here, right? Israel never agreed to these terms. And the only reason that they put out that we accept this ceasefire agreement is why they want everyone to think that, hey, you know what, we're playing ball, we're ready for peace. I have zero sympathy for Hamas. I think that Hamas is the worst actor here by far, followed very, very closely behind by Netanyahu, who is doing everything that he can to ensure that like literally none of the hostages come back alive. Like, let's be honest. It's political suicide for him to not get any of the hostages back, but it's also political suicide for him to acquiesce at all to Hamas. Interested in this.
The programme, I'm Samantha Simmons. We start in the Middle East, and the Israeli military says its forces have taken control of the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing, which borders Egypt and southern Gaza. These are the latest pictures that show the view at the crossing from on board an Israeli military vehicle. Aid organisations operating there say the flow of aid into the territory through the crossing has now stopped. Israel continued to bombard Rafah overnight after rejecting a ceasefire proposal which was put forward by international mediators and agreed by Hamas. Israel says the plan doesn't meet its core demands. Israel is those.
Okay, so I think that when people are reporting on this, it is so cringe. We can verify this really quick because I haven't had a chance to really read Hamas ceasefire deal. Didn't they like change the terms to where like the hostage releases weren't living hostages? The original deal was like, you release 3 hostages every day or every week or some shit like that for X amount of days or X amount of weeks. And, in exchange for those hostages, we release a certain number of Palestinian prisoners. And at the end of it, we can assess what the situation is. Like, that's what the original one was. And then right before the invasion into Rafah, Hamas is like, okay, you know what? We accept the ceasefire agreement. But the terms changed. Without negotiating with Israel, the terms changed, and it was like, we release 3 hostages every week, living or dead. They can be bodies, they can be alive. And you guys have to release 50 prisoners for every hostage that we release. And at the end of 4 weeks, it's a permanent ceasefire, and we go back to business as usual. Like, that's ridiculous. 3-phase deal for a ceasefire and hostages for prisoner swap, although an Israeli official said the deal was not acceptable to Israel because terms had been softened. Let's see here. United States, which alongside Qatar and Egypt, Qatar, I don't know how to say it, has played a mediation role in the talks, said it was studying the Hamas response and was discuss it with its Middle East allies. Phase 1, a 42-day ceasefire period. Hamas freeing 33 Israeli hostages, alive or dead, in return for Israel releasing 30 children and women for each released Israeli hostage, even if they're dead, based on lists provided by Hamas according to the earliest date of detention. Starting from the first day of the ceasefire, the entry of intensive and sufficient quantities of humanitarian aid, relief materials, and fuel, 600 trucks per day, including 50 fuel trucks, of which 300 are for the north, including the fuel necessary for operating the power plant, trade, and equipment needed for rubble removal, rehabilitation, and operation for hospitals. Gotcha. Hamas will release 3 Israeli hostages on the 3rd day of the agreement and then release 3 more hostages every 7 days, prioritizing women if possible, including civilians and conscripts. In the 6th week, Hamas will release all remaining civilian hostages covered by this phase. In exchange, Israel will release the agreed number of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prisons according to the lists that will be provided by Hamas. Cessation of military flights over the Gaza Strip will take place for 10 hours per day and 12 hours on the day of releasing the hostages and prisoners, ending the complete blockade on the Gaza Strip. So, here's my thing. on one hand, I almost think that Israel should take it, but I think that the alive or dead, I think that you need to release all of the bodies, and the 33 Israeli hostages should be alive. They should return the dead and then release 3 every however many days, whatever. I also don't think that Israel is ever going to agree to this until Hamas is out of power. I don't see how this is ever going to work. I don't see how this is ever going to work, right? But Israel never negotiated on the terms that are now laid out here, right? Israel never agreed to these terms. And the only reason that they put out that we accept this ceasefire agreement is why they want everyone to think that, hey, you know what, we're playing ball, we're ready for peace, but they're ready for peace only on their terms, you know? Oh God, what are you linking me in Kick Chat? Why? You know, I'm not going to click any more links. We're watching
Hello
this.
and welcome to the programme. I'm Samantha Simmons. We start in the Middle East, and the Israeli military says its forces have taken control of the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing, which borders Egypt and southern Gaza. These are the latest pictures that show the view at the crossing from on board an Israeli military vehicle. Aid organisations operating there say the flow of aid into the territory...
I'm open to links. I just want to finish one topic at a time. Jesus.
...through the crossing has now stopped. Israel continued to bombard Rafah overnight after rejecting a ceasefire proposal which was put forward by international mediators and agreed by Hamas. Israel says the plan doesn't meet its core demands. Israel is, though, sending a delegation to...
Now, what I'm super interested in is I just don't like the framing, right? Like, on one hand, I think that they should immediately try to negotiate some peace talks, right? But you can't say like, oh, well, we'll release, 3 hostages per week, and some of them will be alive and some of them will be dead. Like, I don't think that that's... Release all of the prisoners, please. Please release the hostages. The framing of this is such that it makes it look like Israel is like being ultra belligerent, even though Hamas is surrendering. But that's not what they're doing. It's just like a PR move. So I'll be interested to see if they comment on that. But I just don't think that that's a good framing for journalism.
Indirect talks in Cairo. Well, we've had this update from our correspondent Fergal Keane in Jerusalem.
They haven't had reason to dance for a long time. But they haven't forgotten how. Even amid uncertainty about Israel's position, hope springs.
And see, Hamas for giving these people false hope when they're putting out a peace deal that Israel will never agree to, right? They're putting out a peace deal that Israel will never agree to because of the special little, things that they added in there, the ending the complete blockade on the Gaza Strip, allowing Hamas to be in control, and then releasing hostages, some alive, some dead, instead of just giving the bodies back to Israel and releasing the hostages. I understand why you would, from the Palestinian side, you would want to release them. Here's a little bit. Let's make sure that you're going to hold on, hold to the agreement because we still have hostages, right? But commit to releasing all of the alive ones first, at least.
Across Gaza, BBC journalists captured the reaction of those convinced, perhaps prematurely, that a ceasefire will happen.
The feeling is indescribable. We're so happy we're going back to our home in Gaza City.
We're refugees from the north and we fled here, this young man says. We're so happy there's a ceasefire. Israelis are still absorbing the news. It came late on one of this society's most important days, when across the country sirens bring the nation to a halt in memory of the dead of the Holocaust. A day of reflection in a country traumatized by the Hamas attack last October. Tonight on the streets of Tel Aviv, those who believe healing that trauma can begin with a ceasefire deal and the release of Israel's hostages.
We expect from the Israeli government to take this deal to save all the remaining hostages who are still alive.
But after 7 months of a war in which Israel's army pledged to destroy Hamas, a ceasefire deal that fails to accomplish that risks breaking Israel's wartime coalition government. Israel will send negotiators to talks but won't stop fighting yet.
Like they should negotiate for a ceasefire. They should. But I don't think that a ceasefire is going to happen until it is blatantly clear that they're going to release all the living hostages. They're going to return the bodies of the dead hostages, and Hamas isn't going to remain in power. And to be honest, once those things are fulfilled, once those conditions are placed and accepted, I don't see a reason to hold on to the blockade. I don't see a reason to hold on to, like the extreme restrictions that they've put on Gaza. Again, my position throughout all of this has been, I have extreme sympathy for the people in Gaza. I have zero sympathy for Hamas. I think that Hamas is the worst actor here by far, followed very, very closely behind by Netanyahu, who is doing everything that he can to ensure that, like, literally none of the hostages come back alive. Like, let's be honest. It's political suicide for him to not get any of the hostages back, but it's also political suicide for him to acquiesce at all to Hamas. So he's caught in a little bit of a bad spot, but like also you have all these hostages over there. You have all these hostages over there that it doesn't seem like you've done a very adequate job of bringing them back home. Well, there are plenty of ways that you can,
I am a political
in good
science
faith,
student. I like to talk
try
about politics. I like to argue
begin
about politics. We
the
talk about all sorts of fun things on here,
drawdown
like
of
drama
military
and
campaign.
politics. And I like to argue with people
you
and
just
chat
don't do
about
it.
a lot of different things.
We examine
comment,
every
and subscribe.
proposal very seriously.
They would back off if Gaza changed to more moderate regimes and stop
I don't
terrorist
like to
actions.
shill.
Right, but that like starts with Hamas leaving and then Israel taking a softer approach to Gaza once Hamas is gone. That's my feeling on things. I don't think that stopping. I don't think that there's any path out of this with Hamas still in control, guys. I'm sorry.
And we review every possibility on the issue of negotiations and the return of the hostages to their homes as quickly as possible and as a central task. At the same time, we carry on with our operations in the Gaza Strip and will continue to do so.
The people of eastern Rafah woke to leaflets telling them to evacuate. Many have been displaced before, but still they were told to leave. Everyone, no matter how old, how young, or how vulnerable.
I'm sorry, this is going to seem really heartless. This is going to seem really cold, but like we've seen a lot of Palestinians from these refugee camps. I just don't see the I don't see a bunch of like starving people. The starvation memes where people are saying that they're on the verge of famine, everyone's starving, people don't have, I totally believe that it's hard to access, some things sometimes, but these people do not look like they're starving
Across
to death,
Gaza,
right?
BBC journalists captured the reaction of those convinced.
Like, do you see like extremely gaunt, dying people? It sounds super heartless, but man, Jesus.
Perhaps zone, or how vulnerable.
Go away,
To
go
Al
away, go away.
Mawasi, Israel says, and other desolate places beyond Rafah. The so-called humanitarian zones were to be expanded, but they've never been safe from sickness, hunger, or war. This is the aftermath of raids on Rafah last night. People hope These may have been some of the last airstrikes if the ceasefire can be made to work. News of the Hamas announcement was still hours away. Nisreen Raja, mother and refugee. For 7 months, this has been the daily reality. Hani Ashtar, an orphan, grieved by his relative Reem. His family was killed during the war, she says. Even he was killed. So many here are grieving and exhausted. Late tonight, Israel attacked eastern Rafah, where they told people to leave. Celebration had turned to fear, and the hope that tomorrow might bring peace. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Let's show you the scene live in Rafah right now, where we can smoke rising into the air there. This comes after the Israeli Defense Forces said it does have operational control of the Gaza side of the Rafah crossing, following the announcement that the IDF was having targeted strikes against Hamas in eastern Rafah. Well, in the past few hours, the military have said that their forces were scanning the area after launching this ground and air operation in parts of eastern Rafah on Monday. This is, as we know, diplomatic efforts are continuing to try and achieve a new truce. Well, let's speak to Louise Wateridge from UNRWA, who joins me now from Rafah. Louise, welcome to you. Tell us what the situation is there right now where you are.
Yeah, things are very tense here in Rafah. The last 24 hours have been a complete rollercoaster of emotion. Even the last few days, there was so much hope for a ceasefire. Anybody you speak to here the last week, the last few months, every day, all they want to know is when there is a ceasefire coming. And it's what everybody has been hoping for. So to wake up yesterday morning to the devastating news that leaflets had been dropped and an evacuation order was in place, it really spread a lot of fear across the community. I'm currently in Western Rafah, but across Eastern Rafah, people started to move. But even outside my window, I was able to see people starting to take down their makeshift shelters, start to pack up and start to leave Rafah. So there's a lot of fear spreading. Throughout the day, you could see more and more people starting to move, starting to leave. And then last night, out of seemingly nowhere, for myself, the first I heard of it was screaming and cheering out of the window. I was completely overcome with emotion. Everyone around, you could see women and children hugging each other, crying, families coming together, just this outpour of relief that people have held for so long at the hope of a potential ceasefire. And then today, this morning, very subdued, very quiet. As the day has gone on, I've seen again more and more vehicles move out of the Rafah area as people are packing up their things and leaving. So there is a sense of fear and chaos now. Obviously, this is a minute by minute, hour by hour situation developing. But clearly people are hearing the situation at the Rafah border crossing and now deciding to leave once again.
And tell us what the aid situation is like, because more aid had been getting in the past few weeks, hadn't it? What's the aid situation there now?
So there is now no aid entering the Gaza Strip. The Rafah crossing is the biggest and the only entry that UNRWA, the largest humanitarian agency here in Gaza, has been using. And now there is no aid able to get in. And in addition to that, there is also no fuel. So fuel is really what the agencies need to run this massive humanitarian operation across the Gaza Strip. Fuel is what's needed to run the trucks to get the aid to the people who need it. Fuel is needed in the generators to run the hospitals and health clinics that are remaining and not damaged and destroyed. So without this fuel and without these aid supplies, the aid operation here is simply going to ground to a halt.
What is the aid operation like at the moment?
We continue to do everything we can. Our colleagues are providing services. UNRWA runs health centres across the Gaza Strip. Even in North Gaza, we have some very heroic colleagues.
I thought that UNRWA was basically completely defunct at this point, no? Or is it because, did they end up getting funding again? Because a couple of months ago, they were found out to be massive, have massive infiltration from Hamas people, right? It's not like when Israel has done military attacks on the Arab world, it has been unprompted. If you were a country and you had people who wanted you exterminated surrounding you, you'd probably advocate a strong military intervention and aid blockade policy. No, I understand why Israel is the way that it is, which is why I don't have the same level of condemnation as retards who are just like, oh no, this is so bad, right? Obviously it's bad when civilians are dying, but I understand why the situation is the way that it is. Why is this covered so much more than even Ukraine? Why do young people care more about brown people getting bombed? I talked to a coworker, a new coworker the other day, and they were part of, I don't know how much I should say. They were part of one of the encampments at a university, and I asked, I just asked questions. I was hiding my power level, you could say. And man, it feels like most of the people at these big events are just not that educated on why they're protesting. A lot of them just don't know. It's really strange. Why would you camp out, just a couple of dozen yards from where you live? Like if you're at one of the dorms of the college, like why would you choose to camp if you don't even know why you're doing it? Or if you don't understand the topic that much? I don't know why Uncle Sam hasn't just said Ukraine won't join NATO, will end aid and negotiate the Donbass, and beyond that Russia backs off, because that's acquiescing to Russia. And we don't have to do that because Russia is, and they're continuing to f themselves with the sunk cost fallacy. Like as bad as the ammo situation for the Ukrainians has been, guess what? It's also, outside of artillery, it's also really bad for the average Russian infantry soldier. Like they don't have the necessary materials. There's videos that get posted on Telegram where they're trying to shame the leadership of Russia into doing something for them, to giving them some like basic food, water, shit like that. So yeah, there's like literally no reason for us to acquiesce to Russia when we know that Russia can't sustain this forever. Meanwhile, like, can Ukraine sustain it forever? No. But with the aid of, the entirety of the West, they probably can. Ironically, Harry Kissinger's description of Russian persistence holds true today. Like they can continue to like throw conscripts into the meat grinder for the end of time, but it's not in their best interest to do that. Like this entire war has been out of their own, like outside of what should be their own self-interest. Is that worse than Uncle Sam breaking up Ukraine through the war and having a stranglehold on Europe, maybe handing it over to, man, it's honestly so sad reading the things that you put in my chat. It's blackpilling. It is actively making me have less faith in freedom of speech, watching the degeneration of someone that has the ability to be smart, but chooses to listen to people who are just conspiracy theorists. Woke BlackRock. Oh, we have a stranglehold over Europe and we're going to hand it over to woke BlackRock. Bro, come on. To be fair, we were all dumb at one point. I was never that dumb, I don't think. Okay. Let's finish this video and then I need to run downstairs and grab some water.
To have maintained running these health services throughout the war. So we do our best to provide these services and provide what aid we have. But it's very concerning to know that this border crossing is closed and that there is no foreseeable aid entering anytime soon.
Okay, thank you very much for telling us about the situation where you are. Louise Wateridge from UNRWA, who is in Rafah. Thank you. Well, let's get more on this with our correspondent in Jerusalem.
Hold on, Ben. Go to your DMs on Discord right now, okay? There we go.
Jerusalem, Yolande now. Yolande, welcome to you. What are the authorities there saying about why they've closed the crossing or taken control of this crossing between Egypt and Rafah, and about the IDF operation in Rafah?
So the Israeli army has put out footage that shows these Israeli tanks rolling into this key crossing, the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt. It says it's taken operational control there, and it's dealing, it says, with Hamas terrorist infrastructure, to use its language, in that area. It says it's killed 20 Hamas terrorists overnight, and that it has also found 3 tunnel shafts, and it's linking operations around this part of Rafah to the rocket fire that it says came from this area fired by Hamas on Sunday, which killed 4 Israeli soldiers close to the Kerem Shalom crossing, leading to the closure of that important crossing in the south of the Gaza Strip as well. Now, at the moment, when we're taking briefings from the Israeli military, they're stressing that this is a very precise, it's a limited operation. They're not putting a time frame on it. They said, too, that they are working to reopen the Kerem Shalom crossing as security allows.
And tell us more about this potential ceasefire deal, which Hamas said it supports. Israel says it goes a long way from meeting its demands. We understand that Unofficial talks are still going to take place today in Cairo. What more do we know about that?
Well, at the moment, this ceasefire deal is really hanging in the balance because of the different positions we had. You know, that declaration from Hamas that was quite dramatic, saying it agreed to what the mediators had proposed. Israel coming out quickly and denying that this was the proposal that it had signed up to, saying that there were differences from its core demands. But we also have had, confusingly, some officials coming out and saying, no, this is actually very similar to the proposal that was put forward by Israel itself at the end of last month. It does seem really that the fundamental difficulty for Israel is signing up to any kind of phased deal of a ceasefire and hostage release that will ultimately lead to an end to hostilities, an end to this war, before, in the eyes of the Israeli government, it has achieved its war aim of dismantling Hamas in Gaza. It said that is necessary to have a victory in this war.
All right, let's see here. What did you just DM me? The State of Russia in 2024 documentary. That's I'll add that to my watch later. I'm not watching a 58-minute video on the state of Russia today.
Well, welcome. For people that are new, if you're watching on YouTube or if you're watching on Kick, I'm Sansol. I am a political science student. I like to talk about politics. I like to argue about politics. We talk about all sorts of fun things on here, like drama and politics. And I like to argue with people in chat about a lot of different things. Like, comment, and subscribe. I don't like to shill. Also,